Shin Wolfer is a diligent office worker living in modern-day Japan who'd rather finish the work by doing overtime than going out with coworkers for a drink or having a life. He's truly a slave to the 9-to-5 corporate capitalist lifestyle. One such day, after doing some more overtime and draining all of his energy, he was walking back home when he spaces out while thinking about the kind of life he was living in front of a speeding truck. Truck-con immediately takes him to an alternate world filled with magic and mystique, heroes and demons and witches and wizards, where his soul is put in the body of a baby who happens to be the last survivor of the wreckage from a demon attack and is found by a magician named Merlin. Reincarnated into another world, he becomes exceptional in everything he does, be it magic or swordsmanship. He was trained and raised by the great mage Merlin, and together, they lived in an isolated forest. As a result, he is clueless and doesn't know much about this supernatural world filled with magic, demons, knights, and magicians. One day, the 8-year-old Shin enters into the forest in search of some game to catch, and for the perfect chance to catch some birds with the help of his wind magic. He also catches a wild boar, and after being satisfied with his game for the day, he heads home and shows them to Merlin. Merlin is an excellent sage and easily notices that he used wind strikes to kill the boar, so he explains they often prove effective for hunting. Merlin decides to test his magic skill and tells him to light up some wood. Shin happily does this while he secretly expresses how glad he is that he doesn't have to shout out incantations to perform magic. Just then, Melita Bowen, his magic gear teacher, and Michael Collin, his sword instructor, arrive at the cottage. Melita immediately scolds Shin for doing something as dangerous as hunting a boar. However, he explains that it's not all that dangerous considering he wore the magic gear they made together. Merlin also praises Shin's superb magical talent, leading Michael to cut and extremely impressed. He teases him with a more brutal combat training, but Shin immediately protests. 2 years later, Merlin takes Shin to hunt some demons. He explains that demons are born when regular animals fail to control the magical energy that flows through them. This leads them to go berserk, and it can happen to humans as well. A long time ago, a human demon almost destroyed their nation, but luckily Merlin defeated it, earning the title of the nation's hero. He teaches Shin search magic, which involves spreading mana from his body toward the surroundings until it comes in contact with other magical signatures. He doesn't think Shin would be able to instantly pull it off in 10 years, but he gets a shocker. Using search magic, Shin is able to observe creatures and people from afar, and while searching, he suddenly senses a sinister energy coming from a particular direction, which Merlin confirms to be a demon. They rush to the location of the demon, oozing out a dark aura. Shin draws his sword without hesitation and launches himself towards the demon. Using his vibrating sword and enchanted boats to maneuver, it only takes a few seconds for him to slay the monster. Merlin can only stand speechless, amazed at Shin's ability, while Shin asks him whether he did a good job. He praises him for killing the demon, but asks what kind of magic he enchanted into his boots. Shin brushes off the question, not wanting to reveal that he has memories from his past life, unknown of the fact that Merlin and the others are already aware that he came from an alternate world. The next day, combat training with Michael continues to be brutal for Shin, who prefers magic. After the training, Merlin takes him to the mountains where he reveals to him how he was found in a demon attack wreckage. Shin asks about his real parents, but Merlin explains they were injured beyond recognition. Having already come to terms with his situation, he tells Merlin he only considers him, Michael, and Melinda as his family since they raised him. These kind words make Merlin burst out in tears like a little baby. On his 15th birthday, a manhood party is thrown for Shin. In attendance is his uncle Dicium, along with 2 of his kids, Christina and Siegfried. During the party, Shin is asked what he would do once he became an adult. However, he has never left the forest, so he explains he'd like to go explore a nearby town. Apart from this, he has no goal whatsoever. Christina suggests he could join the Royal Knights or become a demon hunter. The last guest, and a merchant called Tom Hogg, explains that there's a demon hunter society and he could earn a living by slaying demons. They continue their suggestions, leading up to the 2 siblings to start bickering. Just then, Shin reveals he doesn't know how to use money, and this leaves everyone flabbergasted. It turns out all Merlin taught him was magic. At least he is so good at magic, he transports everyone to the wilderness for a magic test. Michael inquires why they came to a wilderness, leaving Merlin to explain how dangerous it'll be for Shin to show off his latest spell in the forest. Merlin tells them to brace themselves, then he instructs Shin to show off his spell. Shin begins by imagining a regular fire and adding more oxygen than usual. Everyone is already shocked since a blue flame is rare enough. He then adds hydrogen and compresses the impact to a single point. The result plays out like a mini nuclear bomb, but this is more than enough to freak everyone out, especially Melinda. The result of the magical show-off leads the group to conclude it'll be too dangerous to let an ace talent like Shin roam free. Dicium also notes that he could offset the balance of the nations, leading every king to have their eyes on him. He suggests Shin be enrolled in a magic academy, but Merlin doesn't like the idea. This would mean Shin became part of his nation's assets. It turns out Dicium is the king of the Earlshide Kingdom, and only Shin has no idea of his position. Christina is a royal guard, and Siegfried is a mage escort for the king rather than his kids. Even Michael was once the commander of the Royal Knights but is now retired. Shin is shocked by this, but Dicium also narrates how he was a student when the Demonoid wreaked havoc on their nation. Just when he was to be killed, Merlin and Melinda showed up. Combining his magic with her magic gear skill, they defeated the Demonoid together. Moving on, he explains Shin would be able to learn how the world works as well as make friends his age if he joins the Magic Academy after taking the entrance exam, as they try to make no room for influence and nobility privileges. Merlin realizes that he can't keep Shin trapped with him forever and agrees to let him take admissions in the Magic Academy. Some days later, Shin alongside Merlin and Melinda set out for the capital for his entrance exam. Soon, they get to the capital's checkpoint. On showing their IDs, the guard freaks out and calls them Merlin the Wise Man and Melita the Guru. Word of their arrival spreads like wildfire across town, so they hurry to their mansion. Here they are welcomed by tons of maids and butlers ready to spoil them with VIP treatment. Shin goes out to the market, where he experiences a life outside the forest for the first time. He wanders around and eventually gets lost in an alley. Here, he hears the screams of a girl being harassed by 3 adventurers. Shin, disgusted by their behavior, steps in, so they turn to him and reveal they are demon hunters who serve justice. Shin tells them hunting girls makes them villains instead of champions of justice, making them angry. One of the guys rushes in with a punch, but for Shin, it is so slow that he is easily able to dodge it, and slams him to the ground in an instant. The second man runs up to him but gets knocked down after a swift kick, leaving the third man alone. He quickly takes out a dagger and runs at Shin, but to everyone's surprise, Shin simply intercepts the dagger with the palm of his hand, shattering it completely and knocking him out with a swift punch. Afterwards, the girl goes to ask if the dagger hurt him, but Shin reveals he is fine. Her friend also comes to thank Shin, but he falls in love with her at first glance. Over at a cafe, the girls introduce themselves as Maria and Sicilian, and he finds out that they are also taking the Magic Academy entrance exam like him and become friends. Maria, a super fan of the heroes, especially Melita, starts rambling on about them and how their son would also be joining the academy. Shin suddenly becomes uncomfortable and, not wanting to reveal his identity, decides to pay for their drinks before taking his leave. On the day of the exam, Shin tries to find his way across the notice board, but a rude noble attempts to grab him by the shoulder. He twists his arm as a safety measure, but the angry boy called Kurt Reedsberg begins writing on his family's position and threatens Shin. Luckily, the Crown Prince, August, shows up and reminds him of the punishment for using his position as a noble in school. Putting him in his place, Kurt decides to simply walk away, as no one wants to have any kind of feud with the royal family. Shin is shocked to find out that he is King Dissim's son. Since he regards him as an uncle, he calls August his cousin, prompting August to laugh at the way he casually addresses the Crown Prince, but seems to not mind it at all. They all take the written exam in a hall, and afterward, they move to the practical test. Shin is excited to see another mage perform magic, but is shocked when a boy starts chanting. He conjures a tiny flame, but everyone seems impressed, except for Shin, who is mortified. The next candidate doesn't do better, and neither does the next, and Shin can only watch disappointedly. When it gets to his turn, the instructor tells him to keep his powers under control since she got heads up from the king. Shin reduces his powers to the minimum, but still manages to destroy the room. The result is out, and both Shin and August passed. They head over to collect their uniforms, which the receptionist reveals have been enchanted with defensive magic. She tells them not to enchant it themselves, so Shin asks if he can let Melita do it, so she agrees. She adds that he was the top scorer of the entrance exam, and so he has to give a speech at the entrance ceremony. Shin immediately tries to push the duty to August, but this time, August plays his cards right by reminding him of the rule barring nobility from privileges. At night, Shin decides to overwrite the school's enchantment with a special pen and goes on to invent his own enchantment that not just acts as a defense but also allows auto-healing and conversion of magic into kinetic energy. Satisfied with his accomplishment, he yells out in excitement, drawing the attention of Melita, who is so shocked that the next day she makes Shin promise not to reveal that he enchanted his own uniform. At the entrance ceremony, Shin's name is called out for his speech, and the girls finally realize who he is. They had already met the hero's child they've been fussing about. Shin calmly gives his speech while Kurt brims with anger and hate. Shin, August, and the pretty duo are placed in the S-rank class. After homeroom, Sicilian reveals she is being hounded by a man whose family is ranked higher than hers. Shin is glad they told him, but he soon finds out the man is Kurt. He walks in and tries to forcefully grab Sicilian, so Shin stops him. He reveals that they are engaged, so Shin thinks of stepping back. But seeing her trembling in fear, he promises to protect her. She tells him she never agreed to the engagement and that he should stop forcing himself on her. He reminds her his father can make her pay for her defiance, but then August steps in, and having heard his threats, promises to report the situation to the king. He manages to make Kurt leave and then begins teasing Shin for showing off in front of a pretty girl like Sicilian. Shin decides they should come home with him since Kurt might pull off something again. Maria immediately agrees since it's an opportunity to meet her idol. August decides to accompany them as well, meaning his escorts. Julius and Thor must also come along. At home, Shin introduces each of his friends to his grandparents. Afterward, he explains her situation and asks for permission to overwrite the enchantment on Sicilian's uniform. Melita then asks Sicilian if she is worthy of the commitment Shin plans to make for her. Although Shin doesn't think much of it, Melita explains that once Shin enchants her uniform, it would become a national treasure that can sell for an unbelievable amount. Sicilian then begins sobbing and reveals she did wrong by taking advantage of his kindness to a stranger like her. She decides to decline the help and leave, but then Melita stops her. She encourages her honesty and allows Shin to re-enchant her uniform. The king also makes everyone swear not to tell a soul about his enchantment, since everyone in the military would certainly want a taste. In the end, Shin ends up enchanting everyone's clothes except Maria, who doesn't want the weight of owning a national treasure. The next day, Shin uses his search magic to keep her safe as he walks her to school. She appreciates him, but the early morning romance becomes an eyesore for Maria. In school, a yellow-haired girl comes rushing in just in time for class. The girl named Alice Corner explains that she was so excited about her first day in school that she couldn't sleep. This leaves Shin questioning why the world's system even permits a 15-year-old to be an adult. The teacher arrives and immediately takes them out for a tour around the school. He tells them about the different clubs for magic, making potions, and bodybuilding, and admonishes them to join one. Julius really admires the bodybuilding club but knows he can't join. However, August permits him to, since it's an opportunity to finally be free from his escorts. When asked what club Shin would like to join, he has no clue. August suggests he form his own club, and the teacher even supports it. Everyone in the class supports the initiative rather quickly, but Thor brings up an important question. What would be the purpose of the club? Alice suggests Shin can tell them about the heroes, but the teacher reveals there's already a fan club for that. They then settle for learning advanced magic with Shin's help and name the club the Ultimate Magic Study Group. The next day in school, the group finds out Kurt was grounded, and when Shin inquires why he acts so aggressively, they explain that he wasn't always like that and only changed when he started frequenting a lab owned by Mr. Shrum. Mr. Shrum was their magic teacher in middle school and had an eye for talent. Skazillion seems to be sad because now that Kurt is no longer a problem, Shin doesn't have to escort her to school by being her Prince Charming, but she is excited to learn that he still wants to walk her every day to school, making her blush. Shin tells them he can usually sense ill intent with his search magic, but everyone seems surprised such a thing is possible. He explains that the magic power of demons is sinister and abnormal, and bad people have a similar vibe. This prompts Lin to ask him if he has hunted a demon before, to which he nods. Everyone is shocked, but even more astonished to find out he was just 10 years old when he killed the 3-meter demonized bear on his own. Just outside the cafeteria, Shin senses a demonic presence, which turns out to be Kurt, who approaches them and immediately attacks them with his flame magic. Shin's barrier barely holds its own, so he tells the group to activate their uniforms with mana. Shin's hands are burned from the intensity of the heat, but his auto-healing kicks in to provide him some relaxation. It dawns on them that Kurt is out for their lives, so they prepare to fight. Kurt continues to disperse a negative aura as he slowly transforms into a demon. Shin immediately asks August to bring the rest to safety while he holds off Kurt. August becomes angry that Shin doesn't see them as capable enough to fight, but Shin tells him that it is for their own safety. August realizes that Shin is right and leads everyone to safety. With no one to distract him, Shin activates his blue flames, ready to fight. Kurt attacks explosively, while Shin evades with his gear. He tries to slow Kurt down, but his tiny flames do a lot more damage than anticipated. Kurt gets back on his feet and starts cursing at Shin, surprising him completely as Demonoids are not supposed to be capable of speech and reason. He continues to attack him, but Shin evades all of the attacks by taking flight in the air out of his reach. He then uses lightning magic on Kurt, and even though it does some damage, it is not enough to stop Kurt, as he continues to go on a rampage while Shin tries to think of a way to save this poor student from dying. Soon, his magic powers start accumulating at such a high rate that he starts to self-destruct. Realizing that the blast radius would destroy the school, Shin brings out his ultrasonic blade and dashes towards him, avoiding his attacks before slaying him. He falls to his knees in the realization that he just killed a person. However, his friends arrive, standing in amazement that Shin emerged victorious against a demon. Shrum, who was responsible for turning Kurt, his mentee, into a demon, now has his sights on Shin, who stares blankly at the window. With August's arrival, he reveals the circumstances of Kurt's transformation are absurd, and August agrees since Kurt didn't have enough magical knowledge to cast a spell that would mistakenly turn him into a demon. He deduces that it might be artificially induced since Kurt retained his senses, unlike a regular demon. This leads him to conclude that Kurt may have been used for human experimentation. Later that day, they reach home to find the king and his aide waiting for Shin, and he is conferred a first merit honor for averting a crisis. He is surprised, but Merlin confronts Dicium, who quickly explains that the incident had already spread throughout the nation, and that withholding the award of a hero from him wouldn't sit well with the masses. He once again promises to keep Shin out of political matters, leaving Merlin no choice but to agree. The next day, Shin becomes the talk of the town, and this makes walking around rather uncomfortable as all the girls also have their sights on him, but Sizzoline's presence makes them think he is taken. Meanwhile, in school, everyone rushes to join Shin's club, so the teacher is worried about whether to put a cap on the number of students that can join a club. He decides to make the minimum requirement for joining the club the ability to use other dimensional storage space. In the end, only 2 students passed. Mark Bean, who is the son of a blacksmith, and his childhood friend Olivia Stone, whose family owns a diner. It turns out Alice and the ladies are big fans of their diner, so Olivia promises to reserve a table for them. Shin also reveals that he would like to have a custom weapon, but Mark tells him he can barely make a knife as of now, so Shin will have to wait. Mark thinks a demon-killing sword must be exceptional. Yuri, his classmate and an enchanter, remarks how outstanding Shin's talent is, but he encourages her. Afterward, Strim is brought in for questioning by the Order of Knights. However, it becomes clear that he is under heavy suspicion. After being surrounded and unable to prove his innocence, he drops the act, revealing his true villainous nature. He explains that he has been conducting human experiments, and now that they are over, he is ready to escape. The group stumbles onto the battle scene, with Strim at the center of it all. Once he begins confessing to demonizing Kurt, Shin dashes at him with his sword and flames simultaneously. He blocks the attack and manages to evade all of the strikes while Shin continues to slash, but he gets nowhere with his sword strikes. He uses earth magic to get him in the air, in a virtually inescapable position. However, Shetram can use floating magic. Shin unexpectedly lifts himself towards him with his gear and lands a strike. He follows up with intensely hot flames, leading Shrum to push him back with a powerful surge. Unfortunately, his glasses get broken and everyone finds out he is a demon with perfect control over reason. He boasts about how he has attained a peak where humans are nothing but playthings. This angers Shin, who launches an impulsive attack. Strum thinks he missed, but in reality he activated chain reaction magic that hit him directly. The heat of the attack manages to turn the surroundings to glass, but despite the damage, he has his doubts about Shrum's survival. He is thanked by the head court magician, Rupert Olgram, and Knight Commander Dominic Gaster for his help. They then ask how he created such a spell, but when he began explaining the concept, even the court mage couldn't keep up. Some days later, Shin is dressed for his award ceremony. He is presented to the royal court and applauded by high-ranking nobles. He is then conferred his medal by the king, and afterwards he announces to the court that Shin must not be used for military or political purposes. He explains that the consequence of breaking the agreement was the departure of Merlin and his family from their nation. Shin startles everyone by arriving at school with his gate magic. He explains that he had to escape the mob of fans at his house. He explains to a curious Lin how the concept of his gate lies in reducing the distance between two locations rather than regular teleportation. Of course, she doesn't understand, and so he encourages her by revealing that Merlin himself can't wrap his head around the concept. He then suggests the group level up since the capital is becoming less safe. He explains that they first need to learn the amount of magic they all have. Contrary to the regular belief that higher level spells need incantations, Shin notes that everything boils down to the amount of magic that is the fuel for spells. First, he examines Maria's barrier, who seems very thin. He then asks Sicilian to make a barrier using the enchanted accessory he gifted her. When she does, the barrier is thicker and firmer since the ring has been enchanted with his precise control of magic. Shin decides to demonstrate the amount of magic he can control to the group, but the density is so strong that almost everyone suffocates from the pressure. Meanwhile, Shrum survived and has already put his plans into motion. Using his demon and demonoid army, Shrum takes over the neighboring kingdom, the Blusvia Empire. He goes as far as killing the Emperor himself as an act of revenge. Lord Gaster and Rupert arrive to battle the Empire's forces, but instead they are welcomed by a party led by Shrum and his demonoid army. Having destroyed every town under the Blusvia Empire's control, Shrum, along with Zess and Miria, his lieutenants, gathers his demonoid army for a meeting. He announces they are done with the Empire and reveals he has fulfilled his goal. The soldiers begin to protest, wanting the destruction of the neighboring lands, and surprisingly, he tells them to do whatever they like on their own. On hearing this, most of the demons leave the area to destroy the nearby places. All this rage inside Shrum's heart has been accumulating for a very long time, as when he was a small lord in a town and cared for his people very well. He even gave them tips for farming, and as a result, more and more people migrated to his land from other territories. At the same time, his wife was pregnant, and he worked diligently for a land where everyone could be treated equally. This attitude annoyed the other lords, whose commoners fled to his wonderland, so they decided to arrange for his downfall by inviting him to the capital alone. They sent him a letter, which he received happily, thinking that his efforts had finally been recognized, but after leaving for the capital, numerous incidents of missing people began to pop up around his domain. Fake police also arrived and began spreading rumors that their lord, Olivier Shrum, was selling his people to slavers. For 2 months, the rumors spread like wildfire, and eventually the fake police hatched a plot where they led the people in pursuit of a slave cart. The cart was revealed to be his own, with his seal and crest as legitimate proof, which led the people to take matters into their own hands. They marched towards his house, where his pregnant wife was staying, and set the entire place on fire. Sadly, Shrum arrives a bit too late to save his precious wife and can only look in horror as she is burnt to a crisp in front of him. The villagers didn't offer any help and straight up started accusing him of trading slaves, but he reveals that it was a setup and that it made no sense to traffic humans with a cart carrying his crest and name. The people soon realized they were being played by the other lords, but by this time, Shrum had fallen into despair and swore revenge on everyone. He becomes demonized, destroying the entire domain with a surge of berserk magical power. With this development, the Empire is placed on high alert, and even the school moves to improve everyone's combat prowess. And so joint training with the Order of Knights is announced. The whole class immediately falls into depression since knights and magicians don't have a friendly relationship. The knights call the magicians sprouts since they are weak, while they in turn call the knights muscle brains since they are very physical. Shin tries to make them see why it's necessary to complement each other, but he is attacked since he can fall into either category. Once he reveals he was trained by Michael, everyone loses their cool since he is considered a sword saint. During the joint exercise, they are to exterminate demons in the forest. Arriving at the designated area, they are welcomed by their supervisors, Christina and Siegfried. He pleads with them not to bicker, but it turns out there's no helping it. Just then, both the knights and magicians begin fanning over the supervisors, who are very popular and strong enough to guard the king. August explains to them the prior agreement of letting the knights fight alone at first, and having passed through the system, they give their approval. The knights keep their guards up despite Shin's note that there's no demon around. When he finds a demon, Siegfried instructs them to get ready for battle. The raging boar charges in, but all Shin can think about is how tasty it would have been if it hadn't been demonized. The knights stand their ground despite the size of the demon. However, their attacks are futile as the demon is too fast for them. It destroys their formation and circles back to finish them off. Just then, Shin swoops in with his sword and beheads the monster with a single slash. They get the scolding of their lives, and Christina makes sure to make them realize how weak they are. Afterward, Sicilian heals their wounds, so they all agree to work together. They treat Sicilian like a goddess, and this somehow annoys not only Shin but the female knight who has never been treated like a delicate princess. Just then, some knights ran in to report that over 100 demons were heading their way. However, Shin volunteers to take care of them on his own. The others are instructed to stay out of his way, giving him space to prepare his atomic bomb spell. Everyone freaks out when they see a catastrophe-class demon leading the charge. However, Shin sends a single blast that levels the forest along with every obstacle in front of him. Finally, witnessing Shin's magic leaves everyone awestruck. The woman goes on to apologize for her previous rudeness. She even apologizes to Sicilian, thinking they are a couple. They both begin to blush and make it pretty obvious to everyone around them that they are in love. Soon after, the group encounters a bear demon, but this time, the mages start the attack and also support the knights who wait for the chance to deal a finishing blow. Siegfried wants to know how everyone suddenly leveled up to be on par with court magicians. Shin tells him they've made a magic training club where they practice together. He explains that he used the method Merlin taught him to train his friends, and this visualization method intrigues Siegfried. He begs to join them, but August steps in, reminding him that anything regarding Shin's magic is delicate. He adds that the nation is already in a state of emergency due to Strum's handiwork. Eventually, Siegfried gives up and opts to at least learn how to practice on his own. He is told it's all about daily magic control, but he doesn't believe it. As proof, Maria and Sicilian are asked to project barriers. Siegfried is impressed, but they argue about how thin theirs are compared to Shin's. He encourages Maria by smooth-talking her, and this gets into her head. The training session ends for Shin's group. However, the knights and mages in the other groups bicker all through the exercise. In the end, the knights learn their place the hard way. During the rendezvous, August announces that everyone in their magic club will be placed under supervision after graduation. He adds that they may end up forming a special division, so Shin apologizes for ruining their lives. However, they are excited that their future has been secured and even thank him for doing them a favor. Some days later, they go to Shin's special training ground to practice their overpowered spells away from prying eyes. After training, August reveals new information about the Demonoids. Maria tries to stop him from spilling top-secret information on them, but he goes on. He explains that they are already a special class, and as such, they need to be adequately informed. He tells them how the Blustia Empire fell and how there are plans to form a coalition against the ever-increasing number of Demonoid. Immediately, Shin announces that it's time for a training camp. Looking for a place where everyone can stay and relax, they begin to suggest family estates and resorts. They, however, settle for Sicilian's family's hot spring. He reveals the plan to his grandparents, but Melita quickly scolds him for not taking adult supervision into consideration. She and Merlin offer to accompany them since they have nothing to do. The next day, they set out for the trip in a carriage. The horses are enchanted with fatigue restoration gear, so they can move non-stop. Maria explains that Melita invented the gear along with so many other useful pieces of equipment that eventually made her more popular than Merlin. Along the way, they sense a demon attack, so they go to the location. Since everyone is eager to fight, they make a choice using sticks. Lynn wins, so she faces off against the pack of demon wolves. She uses wind magic to blow them away in seconds, much to the surprise of the merchants they just saved. They arrive at Sicilian's mansion and are greeted by the housekeepers. They greet Shin like an in-law, making her completely embarrassed. During a relaxing bath, Merlin thanks the group for being friends with Shin, who used to be lonely. August also cuts in and reveals they are only friends because Shin saw him as an equal despite his rank. The next day, Merlin begins the training by supervising their magic control. This time, only Lynn overloads. Melita also teaches them how to enchant pieces of equipment. During Shin's session, Melita notes how they have improved and can even use spells without chanting. However, Shin doesn't think they stand a chance against Demonoids. He doesn't want them to get hurt, so he plans to make the training stricter. When it's time for Shin's practice, everyone puts up a barrier, fearing for their lives. Shin begins by adding combustible gas to his flame spell. This gives it a different color. He compresses the energy and releases it in one direction. This creates a bigger explosion that splits several mountains like a railgun beam. Everyone freaks out at the absurdity of the spell and decides to call it a day. August asks Shin to take him to the palace so he can get some new information. They arrive at the gate only to be welcomed by Ellie, his fiancée. Shin is shocked that he has a fiancée, but he gets more stunned by how she switches between a calm and frantic attitude. May, August's sister, also shows up, and they complain that he abandoned them to go have fun alone with the heroes whom they adore a lot. Shin acts kind towards May and tells her to see him as an elder brother. They then reveal that they have been permitted to join the training camp. However, August doesn't want to hear a word of it. He goes to make the king understand the dangers, but he sides with the ladies instead. With that said, they head back to the hot spring city. Ellie makes it clear her goal is to keep pests away from her fiancé. Shin thinks she's talking about the girls, but it turns out her beef is with him. This is because August doesn't stop talking about him at home, even when they are alone together. He apologizes to her and also reveals that Shin has a girlfriend. Once Shin protests, he uses the opportunity to make him admit his feelings for Sicilian. He finally admits he likes her but isn't sure she shares the same feeling. At home, Shin begins acting strangely around her. Before he gets the chance, the two girls spill the beans and announce that they have been talking about her the whole day. Taking up May's hands, Melita remarks that Shin wasn't the least adorable like her as a kid. Everyone agrees except for Sicilian, who ends up shouting how she'll love to have his kids. She gets embarrassed by her outburst and runs out, blushing seriously. This becomes all the proof he needs to have before he asks her out. He summons up courage and goes out to meet with her alone. They have an awkward moment, so she breaks the silence by apologizing for her outburst. Shin also reveals that he fell in love with her at first sight. They then profess their love for each other and become a couple. It turns out everyone has been eavesdropping on their conversation, which ends up ruining their moment. The next day, the new couples encounter each other in the hallway. Blooming with fresh love and glowing red, Sicilian asks that they announce their relationship to her parents. They arrive at their estate, and Shin goes on to ask for permission to date their daughter. Instead of a strict fatherly attitude, her dad thanks him for choosing his daughter. Meanwhile, the mother turns out to be a cool-headed one. She explains that as an ability, they can't just date. Rather, they have to court with the aim of getting married. And of course, they both happily agree. During training, Ellie is surprised by the level of their magic, but Shin reveals that it was only a warm-up. Everyone puts up their barriers as Shin takes the stage. Although he explains that he isn't doing anything dangerous, they don't believe him. He picks up a rock and infuses magic into it. After a while, the stone begins to float. Everyone is perplexed, so he explains that it is anti-gravity magic. He then casts the spell on himself and using wind magic, he takes to the sky like a bird. Later, Shin explains that they got engaged all of a sudden. Although they don't object, they reveal that they have to pay a visit together. They arrive at the mansion, where they explain that Shin is not related to them by blood. Melita thinks they only agreed since he was their grandson, but her dad expresses his disappointment that they thought so little of their family. He explains that the reason they agreed to the engagement was because Shin had always made it his duty to protect their daughter. With that sorted out, the heroes apologize for their presumption. Later, the group gets new uniforms enchanted with camouflage and other new specs. August realizes that the new upgrades only mean one thing, and he is spot on. Shin announces that they are to hunt down catastrophe-level demons. In the forest, they soon find a catastrophe-class demonized lion. He delegated the weak half of the group to deal with it. At first, they are scared, but with Shin's guidance, the lion doesn't even stand a chance. They end up destroying part of the forest along with the remains of the demon. Next, the strongest fighters in the team all take down individual catastrophe-class demons on their own. Tony uses Shin's vibration sword to defeat his demon, and afterward, Julius begs to try it out too. The next day, the new couples both dressed up elegantly for their engagement party. They are so beautiful that they forget themselves in awe of their looks. They arrive at the party holding hands while everyone gives them their blessings. The king takes the stage to congratulate them with a toast. Some days later, Shin teaches the whole group how to fly. Mei wants to try it out so badly that she comes prepared with extra clothing. A few weeks later, August is coronated as the crown prince of the kingdom of Earlshide. While he swears his oath, a messenger comes in reporting that the kingdom of Swede is being attacked by demonoids. He uses the opportunity to announce they have already put in place a special division along with Shin and are prepared to battle the demonoid. He asks Shin to also give a speech to calm the minds of the people. Shin then announces that the name of their group is the Ultimate Magicians, and they will immediately set out to provide support to their neighbor in distress. While they are embarrassed by the name, the people are pumped as they take to the sky with magic. While they close in at the border, Shin tells Sicilian to focus on healing the injured while the others pair up against an opponent. The demonoid continues to rain destruction on the kingdom and take their time bullying the weak. Shin arrives in time and sends one of the bullies flying. His partner thinks Shin is a mere human and begins charging for an attack. However, Shin wipes the look off his face with a giant fireball. He helps put the family's minds at ease as they head to the shelter. Meanwhile, August announces the arrival of his group and uses Shin's fame as a hero to instill fear in the minds of the demonoids. Lin and Alice pair up to face a demon who calls them kids. This angers Alice, but Lin calms her down before she gets over her head. The spell also ends up defeating the demon, so Lin gives Alice a pep talk about how brutal their opponents are. They move on to save a knight being bullied by another demon. Alice is addressed as a kid for her looks yet again, so she makes him eat his words by burning him to crisps. They try to help the injured knight, but being helped by kids leaves him embarrassed, so he decides to find his way to the shelter alone. Thor and Julius team up as the perfect pair. While Thor uses wind magic to torment his opponent, Julius uses brute force rather than magic. He tries to see the reason behind their attack on the city, but the demon snaps. He explains that they had been oppressed by nobles for too long, and now they have to take out their anger on people. Yuri uses her ice magic to freeze a demon while her partner Tony slays them with the vibrating sword. Some demons decide to target a shelter, but luckily, Mark is there along with Olivia, who stumps one enemy with a boulder. Mark also protects her, and together, they form a powerful duo with a perfect understanding of themselves. Meanwhile, Shin makes fighting easy as he continues to fry his opponents one after the other. Shrim's aide is gripped with fear as he observes his magic from a distance. August and Maria encounter the leader of the group, who recognizes him as a prince. He decides to abduct him, so they prepare to fight. Maria quickly attacks with flame magic, but he blocks her with the corpses of his dead comrades. He launches at them fast and lands a punch on her. However, the impact is reduced by her enchanted clothes. He even slams her through a wall, but she simply rises back up. Maria sends numerous barrages of fireballs his way, but he uses one of Shin's magic tools, which he stole from a mage, to defend himself. Knowing how potent Shin's craft is, they launch an all-out attack at him in different directions. This makes him lose concentration, thus causing the barrier to shatter. August immediately blasts a donut in his chest, and then he praises Maria for understanding his intent during the battle. After the battle dies down, it becomes clear to the observing demonoids that Shin is incredibly dangerous. Zest decides it's best to retreat and asks Miria to run riot on the city and handle the Ultimate Magicians if need be. The group steps in and saves the knights who are about to be killed. They gang up on her, but she easily evades their attacks. She lands a hit on Alice, but the damage isn't serious thanks to her gear. She goes on to mix a combination of magic and martial arts and hold her hostage. While she handles the group, the demonoids call for a retreat. Although they still want to run wild, seeing Shin fry their companions like stick fish makes them flee. He catches up to them using his beam attack from behind. However, he stops as he notices his teammates are being annihilated by a single foe. She proves her superior battle experience by taking advantage of every flaw in their movement and making them pay dearly for it. She attacks an unconscious Tony, and when Alice shields him, she knocks her unconscious from underneath her. Shin shows up to find his comrades terribly injured. She decides to test his strength for a bit, and so they engage each other. Shin uses a combination of magic and his sword, while she uses her combat skill and earth magic. He begins to push her into a corner, and so she tries to escape. She attacks his newly arrived comrades instead, and when he tries to chase after her, his path gets blocked. She uses massive explosion magic, so Shin has no choice to raise a massive barrier over a wide range of areas. He did protect his friends, but they used the opportunity to make their escape. August suggests Miria must be an ex-soldier or hunter, and so they thank their stars Strickram didn't accompany her to the battle. While the demonoids retreat, Strickram watches from above. Having enjoyed the battle, he begins to plot his next move. Shin and August arrive at the shelter to find so many injured people. They ask for an update from Marks, so he explains that Sicilian is doing her best inside. He orders the team to help out with the healing while Shin goes to help her. He finds her exerting herself to save a dying man, but despite her efforts, her magic isn't enough to save him. While his family sobs, she decides to use her uniform's healing properties as a last resort. Shin stops her, as it wouldn't change the situation. Instead, he uses a more advanced healing method that involves healing individual injuries at a mid level. August watches secretly and can only imagine the scope of his overwhelming power. Afterwards, Sicilian breaks down in tears and she weeps and curses her lack of power and how she always depends on him. However, he reveals that the man could have died if she hadn't sustained him long enough for him to arrive. The other people she saved also thanked her earnestly and even nicknamed her a saint. In the palace, the king of Sui thanks them for their efforts, but then August presents an issue. He explains that the Demonoid attack was missing their leader, Stritrum, as well as the key figures during the Empire's destruction. This leads him to conclude that there might be an internal division in the camp of the demon. With Demonoids roaming free, he proposes an alliance with the king. The next day, he also announces that he'll be meeting other nations for an alliance as well. Shin tells him it's a nice idea because if they were familiar with the place, he could have arrived on time using his gate. Hence, they decide to forge alliances with neighboring countries and establish a connection in case of an emergency. Immediately after they arrive home, they are celebrated for their exploits. The king and heroes also come to welcome them. The next day, August reveals his goal to the king, and he is given authority to negotiate an alliance on behalf of the kingdom. Shin is also permitted to embark on this journey, and so May and Ellie decide to tag along. Thor and Julia's promise to handle their safety, so he has no choice but to let them. Over at Shrim's base, he thanks his subordinates for putting on a good show for him. He becomes hyped about Shin's capabilities, but more importantly, hopeful at the prospect of Miria giving birth to a purebred demon. Shin and his team bid the officials farewell before embarking on their journey to protect the world. That's it for this video. Make sure to like and subscribe and watch this